So billionaires Michael and Susan Dell just committed to a $6 billion donation to the federal government to be added to the proposed Trump accounts, which are set to begin next year. So this is one of those one-day feel-good stories that you probably don't care about, but there's a subtext to this gambit that needs to be unpacked and understood. At the risk of sounding entirely cynical, this generous and somewhat innocuous gift is masking terrible intent on the part of this administration. See, it's part and parcel of a much larger effort underway to privatize the government, prop up the stock market, and provide yet another benefit to wealthy families under the guise of philanthropy. And as usual, none other than the worst hedge fund manager on the planet, who's now in charge of our money, gave the whole game away. So you have that to look forward to. For the MeidasTouch Network, I'm Max from UNFTR. So let's walk through this together.
Michael and Susan Dell are committing to one of the largest private donations in American history, which will directly benefit the next generation of American children through the new Trump Accounts program that we created in our One Big Beautiful Bill. First, I guess you could say, real trust funds for every American child, allowing family members, employers, corporations, generous donors to contribute money that will be invested and grow over the course of a child's life.
Sounds pretty magnanimous, right? A gift of $250 to every child born in the United States in an account that matures when they turn 18, on top of the $1,000 in seed funding for every child in the soon-to-be established Trump accounts, turning every kid born in the next 4 years into the next Michael Dell. What's the harm? So I think the best thing to do is to start with the Trump accounts themselves, like what they actually are, what they're designed to do, because they were part of the big, beautiful bill, but they kind of flew under the radar because they weren't actually established this year. They were supposed to be, but they're actually going to be established next year. Then we'll do a little bit of math before we get into what's really behind all of this. So the big idea behind the Trump accounts, and yes, that is literally what they're being called, is to automatically create an investment account for newborn babies, to verified U.S. citizens, of course, and seed them with $1,000 directly from the U.S. Treasury. Now, in theory, parents can choose their preferred financial institution as a fiduciary, but even if they don't, or they're unaware that these accounts even exist, the accounts will be auto-created. So that's the whole idea. That's probably why it's not in effect yet. It's because this is going to actually take some time to work through the details. Now, the original name of these accounts, by the way, was MAGA accounts, which was an acronym for Money Accounts for Growth and Advancement, which should be clue number one that this is political theater at its best. Then they changed them to Trump accounts, which is probably clue number two that this is just political theater. Now, here's how they're supposed to work because they, again, don't actually exist yet. The funds would be invested into a single diversified index fund that tracks the U.S. stock market. So no individual stock picking would be allowed. And then at age 18, beneficiaries can withdraw 50% for approved uses. These include education, down payment on a home for first-time home buyers, and business ventures, whatever that means. Anyway, at age 25, full access for these qualified expenses would occur. And then at age 30, total unrestricted access. Now, how they would go about qualifying a business is beyond me, but let's just go with it as it's stated. Again, it sounds harmless, and I honestly don't feel great about attacking this plan because there will be people that benefit from this. We all need a little extra cash, even if it's 18, 25, or 30 years from now, right? So let's level set here with some basic math. $1,000 in a stock index tracking account compounding over 18 years, right? Great. Let's be generous and assume a 6% annual return over that time period, which is totally in line with historical trends if you take all the major indices into account. But we also have to assume that there will be inflation and that it will continue at about 3% annually because that's what most economists are modeling nowadays. So that means that the inflation-adjusted value of this account, assuming no changes, meaning no adding to the account, no stock market crashes, so no changes to the upside or the downside, all things being equal, these lucky little babies would have an inflation-adjusted $2,800 in 18 years. And they'd be able to withdraw $1,400 of it penalty-free to use for that down payment, for their college education, or some nebulous startup business venture that no one can figure out. Now, penalty-free, but not tax-free, because these are tax-deferred accounts, not tax-exempt accounts. So, let's expand our view and look at it from the government's perspective. Another provision of the plan would allow families to contribute up to $5,000 a year to these accounts. Great. Now we're talking. It's amazing news that just happens to coincide with the median average of household savings in America under the age of 35, typically the age of people having babies. So you get to devote and deplete your entire savings in one shot to fund this new Trump baby account. Also, if you're new to investing and you're just letting all that money rot in some little savings account, don't worry, because the Trump administration is already coordinating with the great stewards of personal savings like Goldman Sachs and Robinhood to help you manage these accounts. And I'm sure it's all going to work out just fine. So there are approximately 3.6 million babies born each year in the United States. Originally, the money was going to cover babies born between 2025 and 2029, though red tape and all that means that it won't start until next year. So let's assume that it goes another full year after that, so we have 4 full years covered. It's pretty easy math. 3.6 million babies, $1,000 each. That's $3.6 billion a year. That's $14.4 billion over the 4 years, but the Joint Committee on Taxation estimates that administrative costs will push it closer to $17 billion. Now, to put that in perspective, the total federal budget is $6.5 trillion. So this is roughly 0.5% of government spending. Maximum publicity, minimal impact. So what's the problem, right? Is this just Trump derangement syndrome? Am I that incapable of giving flowers to this administration? Maybe a little bit, maybe a smidge, a little bit. Actually, I have a huge problem with this. Not necessarily in what it is, but what it's designed to accomplish, the intent behind the whole thing. So bear with me. Let's start by drawing a comparison, because the biggest comparison that the GOP is trying to draw is with the 529 program for education savings, which is by all measures a very popular and very successful program. So to start, 529 plans offer superior tax benefits, with earnings growing tax deferred and withdrawals for the qualified education expenses being entirely tax-free at the federal level. And starting in 2024, unused 529 funds can even be rolled into a Roth IRA for the beneficiary. Trump accounts, by contrast, provide tax deferral, but withdrawals ultimately are taxed at long-term capital gains rates, even for approved uses. So while Trump accounts allow broader uses, like home purchases and these nebulous business ventures, the flexibility comes at the cost of less favorable tax treatment. And I can't wait to see how many scams appear in 18 years to help people set up those businesses. Anyway, in terms of penalties, non-qualified withdrawals from Trump accounts face ordinary income tax plus a 10% penalty on gains. So the bottom line is, if you want effective education savings, use a 529 plan all day, every day. But I have a better comparison. The expanded child tax credit under the American Rescue Plan of 2021 cut child poverty by 46 to 55%, with the supplemental poverty measure showing that child poverty dropped to a record low of 5.2% in 2021, which was down 9.7% from the previous year. The child tax credit was increased to $3,600 per child under the age of 6 and $3,000 per child ages 6 to 17, with payments made monthly from July to December 21st. That was it, providing $250 to $300 per child per month to most American families. Now, for many American families, the direct payment mechanism of Today Money was a godsend. The credit was made also fully refundable, allowing families with little or no earned income to receive the full benefit. And what it did was it put money in the pockets of people. And despite what Republicans like to say about these giveaways, the surveys all revealed the same thing. People used this money for food. They used it for rent, to pay down credit cards, just to breathe again. You see, when you give money directly to parents who really need it, they do what normal people do. They put food on the table, clothing on their children's backs, a roof over their heads. So in terms of cost, in 2021, the total program was around $94 billion. $94 billion going to families who put it into immediate use. Money that circulated through the real economy instead of just padding the balance sheet of Goldman Sachs. And it relieved child poverty and hunger. So it's a total of 1.4% of the federal budget, but it's a fraction of the costs associated with things like Trump tax cuts. And we know it works. Because after the expansion expired at the end of 2021 and not renewing it, probably one of the biggest failures of the Democratic Party, child poverty rates spiked 41% the very next year and returned right back to pre-pandemic levels. But now let's be really clear about what these accounts are all about. Even without Michael and Susan's generous donation, we're talking about $3.6 billion directly into the stock market. With their donation, it's $9.6 billion next year alone. Now, that money is going to Wall Street because it's locked up for at least 18 years, and it can only go into the stock market by design. Now, add the projected private contributions of up to $5,000 annually per account, and we're talking about tens of billions of new potential dollars in just flowing directly into index funds, propping up the U.S. stock market. But let's be real. Relatively few families can actually afford to pad these investment accounts considering they have no savings. So that means that the real compound gains from these accounts, which is what they are totally designed for, the real benefit of something like this is the compound interest that you get by being able to add more and more money into tax-deferred accounts. That means that the real gains behind all this go to people who already have money. Remember, the average savings of baby birthing parent age people is only $5,000 total. So the people who really benefit are those who have a lot more than that in savings already. And even though it's not a big deal at first, if these accounts continued past Trump's term, if they were just codified into law and that's just what we did, it would totally add up. And who's the beneficiary of that? Goldman Sachs. The major financial institutions managing these accounts will receive revenue through asset under management fees, creating another guaranteed income stream from taxpayer-funded accounts. This is a direct wealth transfer from the federal treasury to Wall Street portfolio managers disguised as a benefit for children, with the real compound gains made available to people who already have money. But wait, there's more. There's a long game as well. These Trump accounts serve a larger ideological purpose that extends way beyond their immediate budgetary impact. They represent yet another step in the decades-long conservative project to normalize private investment accounts as an alternative to public social insurance programs. And how can I say that with such conviction? Because the very worst hedge fund manager in the world, turned Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, said the quiet part out loud, as usual. On a Breitbart panel earlier in the year promoting the idea of Trump accounts, he actually uttered these words. He literally called it a backdoor to privatizing Social Security, one of his bigger early gaffes that the White House had to scramble to clarify. See, the GOP has been trying to do this forever. This is very old. George Bush floated the idea and was almost impeached by his own party for saying it out loud. Asshats like Paul Ryan tried it during the Obama years because this is a Milton Friedman, Chicago school, free market, garbage libertarian idea that has been floating around conservative and libertarian think tanks for years because these guys want all of the money in the stock market. So by establishing Trump accounts, Republicans are conditioning Americans to think of government benefits as personal accounts tied to market performance instead of guaranteed public benefits. See, these accounts are subject to market volatility risks. We haven't even talked about that, meaning that the gains are themselves tied to stock market performance and funds are vulnerable to market declines. It's the complete opposite of Social Security's guaranteed benefits, for example, which aren't subject to market fluctuations. So you don't have to worry about the very same vampires on Wall Street destroying the equity markets like they did in the Great Recession, which crushed or at least deferred retirement for millions of Americans. I mean, imagine committing yourself to these accounts and having them grow over time only to watch Wall Street piss away your gains at the moment that you're trying to buy a house or start a business. See, the psychological impact of this is crucial. Instead of the government fulfilling the role that it is obligated to do to provide for the general welfare of the citizenry as written in the Constitution, it's privatizing all of those mechanisms. So to recap, this is a fundamental shift from public insurance to privatized risk. Trump accounts take government funds and immediately hand them to private financial institutions to manage. They create a new revenue stream for Wall Street while providing minimal benefits to families compared to programs that already exist. And that's assuming that you can afford to really participate in the way that it's designed, which is to put in matching funds that no one has. All this does is increase inequality and puts vital funds at risk due to market volatility. This is another masterclass in political theater. Just expensive enough to generate headlines, but cheap enough to avoid real budgetary sacrifice. These aren't investments into your child's future or the country's for that matter. They're investments into the hands of the investor class. So if billionaires like Michael and Susan want to make an actual impact on the lives of children in Trump's America, they'd be better served putting this money into food banks. Because the last available data from 2023 showed that more than 50 million people accessed food from charitable food banks. And you know that number has only gone up. So the Dells said they also hoped that other billionaire friends of theirs would step up to participate in these Trump accounts. So imagine if they convinced their friends to donate to food banks so we could feed people today instead of 18 years from now, to put food on the table today instead of management fees into the pockets of Goldman Sachs. Or how about this crazy idea? Maybe we don't have billionaires at all. Maybe we have a society that doesn't rely on food banks to feed 50 million people. I mean, what are we even talking about here? So yeah, if it sounds like cynicism, that's because this whole goddamn thing is cynical. It's another way for billionaires to guilt wash their money by what? Putting $2,800 into a few million pockets 30 years from now? I'm more than cynical. I'm angry. And so is every American struggling paycheck to paycheck or online at that food bank, or cutting back this holiday season because they have to make rent. These are end times capitalism publicity stunts designed to make billionaires like Mike and Susie feel better about themselves and whitewash the deeds of an administration determined to destroy the administrative state, their words, determined to privatize everything that we hold dear, from healthcare coverage to Social Security, Scott Bessent's words. It's time to stop falling for these gimmicks. For the MeidasTouch Network, I'm Max from UNFTR. You can find me pretty much this pissed off all the time over at UNFTR on YouTube and at UNFTR on Blue Sky. As always, thank you to the Midas Mighty for having me here, and I'll catch you online.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.